Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Dan. This morning I have with me Mr. Ashwin Hemmathagama. He is a journalist by profession. He has turned into a journalist from investment banking, and in journalism he has 20 plus years of experience. He holds a diploma in journalism from University of Colombo. He is an attorney at law by profession. And today we are going to discuss about the 20th century media culture in Sri Lanka. We know that media plays an important role in any country in this world, and that helps to educate people in different ways. Ashwin is working for Daily FT, is the lobby correspondent for the parliament as well. So good morning and welcome to Coffee with Dan.
Good morning.
So let me ask you, Ashwin, why media is important?
Well, Dan, it's a very broad question, but looking at it in overall, I think media is part of our lives. Nobody can deny that it is no longer a part, because it generates popular interest and debates about any social impact or problems that we can think of. And mass media is, of course, a powerful social agent where media affects how we can learn about our world and interact with one another. And media literally mediate our relationship with social institutions. So basically, we base most of our knowledge on news accounts and not experience. We depend on media for what we know and how we relate to the world of politics and many other topics in that case. And we read or watch political debates followed by instant analysis and commentaries by experts. And we then think about these topics and the outcome of these programs. Similar dynamics are present in other media-related institutions and events, and most of it are televised sports events like cricket matches and so on. Media is part of our regular interactions with family and friends. So I think it's a factor that we really can't underestimate, and it is very related to us on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, as you mentioned, media is very multifaceted. It involves different areas of interest, and we know that there is a freedom of expression, and the media is in the forefront of this freedom. And also it's the media to obtain knowledge, it's the media to obtain information for the general public. So how developed is the media in Sri Lanka?
Well, to be honest with you, Sri Lanka, of course, we are still at developing stage in terms of media. No doubt about that, because in Sri Lanka, the media consists of several typical layers like television, radio, newspapers, magazines, and websites. But now the trend has started, whereas new media has come into the picture, whereas tweeting and Facebook and all sorts of things are there. And on top of that, still we have those state and private media operators providing services in 3 different languages, Sinhala, Tamil, and English. And the government, of course, which you know, owns 2 national television stations and radio networks operated by the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. And well, I think after the growth of Sri Lankan economy, many satellite television channels basically were introduced. At the moment, we have something like 30 privately owned television channels in Sri Lanka. They often engage in controversial topics as well. And with the time, during the last 2 decades, the internet, of course, the penetration has increased, whereas the use of internet has grown really fast. And many of the newspapers that we see in day-to-day life has gone online, and e-paper concepts and SMS alerts are there. And we really get updated with the latest news rather waiting until the tomorrow's edition of the printed matter arrives on your doorstep. And as a result, I think Sri Lankans are developing fast in terms of their access to knowledge and information.
We know that the freedom of the press is a key aspect in a society. And Sri Lanka also underwent various climax with the different regimes that we had. And this media freedom, or the press freedom as we say, ran into these different types of treatments, faced different types of treatments from the different regimes we had. So when it comes to press freedom, is it a key concern now?
To be honest with you, Dan, because press freedom is no longer a key concern for Sri Lankans, because since the unity government came into power, well, all media have equal protection under the unity government, whereas you can go on criticizing any politician, including the president and the prime minister, provided the facts are correct. And you no longer have to fear that somebody would, take you into custody or do something bad about it. And during the previous regime, the press freedom in Sri Lanka became the worst in any democratic country. According to the Reporters Without Borders Index, Sri Lanka was ranked at 165th among 173 countries. That was not very long ago. And now we are at 141st place, and Norway happens to be the first in the rank. And you can guess who's at the bottom. That is none other than the North Korea, 180th. So you can see a wide spectrum here. So I think the press freedom and freedom of speech, which is guaranteed by our constitution, is available for anybody to practice or use.
Now, when you say the media should have the freedom, also on the other hand, what comes with the package is that the media should act responsibly. That is to say that by law we know that you should not make any defamatory statements against anyone. And we have the defamation law that would serve the purpose of meeting the damages caused to an individual or a corporate entity. Also, we know that the social media nowadays has become a very quite of a wild thing, that anybody is free to communicate all different kinds of even defamatory things. So is there any changes in the models in terms of this media when it comes to the printed version and now in the social media and so forth?
Yeah, basically still, if you take the social media in that aspect, yes, you can go online and say anything on your Facebook account, and you have to be very responsible on that. But still, people, of course, do comment on certain matters without any, thinking twice about it. So this is very harmful, because in the recent past, if you can remember, people, of course, commented that there's a shortage of fuel, but actually there was no shortage. And answering your question, still, if you look at the whole picture, still the revenue comes primarily from advertising for any media organization. That advertising revenue, of course, subsidize gathering of news, and especially paying for journalists and keeping up the operations running. And but if you look at the 21st century, the first decade, the advertising model was critically injured by the digital revolution, which is none other than the social media that we've been discussing. And across the board, this social media, of course, changed the habit of people, how they access news, how they receive news, how they react to it. And especially the consumers, because nowadays you get an SMS saying that there's a sale going on, there's a discount at this particular store, and then of course you tend to go there at least to have a look what they have for you at store. And advertisers, of course, they have shifted from regular medium of advertising to social media. And if you go online, you can see a lot of Facebook advertisements coming up, and yeah, people, of course, the footfall is very high in terms of social media advertising. And until the rapid expansion of digital media, especially something like home-based newspapers, something like Udayan newspaper in Jaffna. And because these newspapers, of course, were catering to their local population. And if somebody in that particular area, the districts, wants to advertise something, they could easily put it rather than putting it in a Colombo-based newspaper. That was very effective. But I think the social media, of course, is have the hang of it, and they're moving forward. And the regular media, the conventional media, of course, is lagging behind in that aspect. Yeah.
This morning in Coffee with Dan, I have Mr. Ashwin Hemmathagama. He's a journalist by profession with well over 20 years of experience in journalism. He holds a diploma in journalism from University of Colombo. He is working as the lobby correspondent of the Parliament for Daily FT. He also holds an MBA from University of Wales and postgraduate diploma in investment banking from the Postgraduate Institute of Management, University of Sri Lanka. He is an investment banker turned media or a journalist. So turning back to our discussion, Ashwin, now you are the lobby correspondent for Daily FT in the Parliament, and you cover a wide spectrum of debates and news items with regard to parliamentary affairs. If I come back to the question that I raised on this defamatory aspect, how should a journalist act in covering these important parliamentary affairs in the media?
Oh, well, Dan, it's a very, very tricky question because now that we only base what is in the Hansard when we report, because out of the blues the lawmakers can come out with anything because they have the parliamentary privileges. They can call anything, and we really can't report those because we base our reports basically, and it's a must because Hansard is the guiding line. So we have to be very careful because otherwise on the following day they would stand up and say so and so has violated my rights. And it's very tricky. It comes with the experience, of course, because during the past we have seen so many journalists being, antagonized, I would say, simply because violating these rights.
When we talk about international media, how would the data and information guide the today's world?
That's also a very important question because now in our school days we've seen the encyclopedias and big books, and the computers were not very widely seen. So accessing an information, or maybe access to information, was not so frequently available. So looking at the present day, the world has increased the use of information technology, and especially after the global financial crisis, where the financial specialists and economists have invented a data paradigm called big data, which is emerging, associated with the combination of digital data from business transactions, social media, networked computers, and Internet of Things. This big data denotes a large volume of data, business intelligence, specifically political and socio-economic data, and these things, of course, gets analyzed on a day-to-day basis, and it gives, for an ordinary person, you just do a Google search and it gives you a lot of information which is relevant to your topic. And it's quite revolutionary, I would say.
Now, we know that the traditional media that existed in the world is different from what we call now the modern or the contemporary type of media. In the past, media was very basic, but now it has been very constructive. What is the impact of new media on the traditional media?
If you want my honest opinion, traditional media is a dying industry now because everybody would love to have a smart device where you can access your news, articles, and of course, very short articles and catch lines, and if you're not interested you can move on. But if you're using a traditional medium like a newspaper, for that case it's very difficult for you to maneuver while traveling inside a public transport. So, social media and other online sources, also known as new media, have become an integral part of our modern society. The presence of such media, social media in particular, has threatened the existence of the printed newspaper. I mean, this is all over the world and nobody can say anything about it because, I mean, you really have to move on with it. And the effect of this threat is felt on circulation, like I mentioned. And if you take the whole picture, there's a drop of 7%, annual drop, year on year of 7% drop in the printed medium. So it's very, very, I would say, very damaging because still there are people, those who would prefer to have actual newspaper with them so that they could refer. And I mean, you love the feel of a newspaper rather, depending on a smart device.
Yeah, my next question is on the aspect that you discuss about this paper type of media and paperless type of media, what we call the e-media. Now, we know that those days people used to read the papers a lot, but now people are much dependent on the electronic means of obtaining information. Now we can have access to any paper in the world and get information about the other countries and other world politics, business or whatever. So how do you see this revolution?
Well, to be honest with you, if you access an e-paper, it has a lot of conveniences. I would rather say, you can go back and retrieve a paper, probably by 10 years old paper, at a click of a button. But if you really have to, dig it in a pile of newspapers, it would take a lot of time. And the e-papers are, of course, convenient because you can easily store and you can do research and, referencing is very good. And, but there's a factor that influences, the access, or maybe how you would use new medium or e-papers. That is the digital literacy, or IT literacy. And in Sri Lanka, we have IT literacy, of course, and the definition, because this is a new topic, and the definition is a person aged year 5 to 69 is considered as a computer literate person if he or she could use a computer on his or her own. For an example, suppose if a 5-year-old can play a computer game on a computer and he or she is considered as an IT literate person. I know you might have questions about it, but this is the yardstick that we use at the moment. And if a particular person can basically access internet and retrieve a document, that is also considered a big juncture in his or her life. So if you are looking at overall computer literacy reported in Sri Lanka during 2016, we have 27.6% computer literate people in the country. And this survey is, of course, done by the Census and Statistics Department. And we have increased our computer literacy rate from 7.3% in 2009 to 27.6% in 2016. It's a massive jump, of course. Although our literacy rate is above 90%, computer literacy is far behind. But eventually we will get there, I think. And out of the entire demographies, the districts, if you take, the urban sector shows the highest computer literacy, that is 39.2%. And Colombo happens to be the largest area, the Colombo district, where the literacy is very high. But if you take the eastern province, that happens to be the lowest in terms of computer literacy.
Now, when we talk about the age factor, and you just mentioned that most of the people who read, whether it's electronic, whether it's paper mode, are between the ages of 5 to 69. So when we consider this area, we know that your market or your base of either the readers or the viewers or listeners of the media varies with their age. So how could you, in your media modes, help educating the youth generation and then focusing on the middle-aged generation and then focus on the old generation?
Then it's like this, because now if you take this new media, because it has different apps or platforms which caters to different age sectors and market segments and so on. Because if you take FB, which is not so popular among, I may say, like elderly people, but I mean it is very popular among the younger generation. So if you want to get across some new idea or maybe about a particular shop or way of living or to buy a new phone, I mean it is the correct platform. So likewise there are certain already identified modes which caters to different segments. So it's very easy and well, depending on the age limit as well. Yeah.
Do you think that in Sri Lanka we have the proper educational system in place to produce more and more journalists and media personnel? And also whether we have the proper infrastructure where if we are going to move ahead towards these modern media?
If you look at the past, because becoming a journalist was a task, because it was a poorly paid industry until like 20 years back, simply because the competition was not high and very few organizations were there, especially in terms of electronic media and printed media. Let's leave out new media. And then, of course, obtaining qualifications was also a hurdle, because you have to have recognized qualifications, on top of that good experience. And few universities like state universities, Colombo and Jayawardenepura and Kalaniya, they came out with certain recognized educational programs starting from certificate level to diploma level and so on. And those who were really interested could have, could easily join these courses. And very recently, the Sri Lanka Press Institute, of course, they have started their own diplomas and degree programs as well. So, I mean, there are accredited institutions who gives you this qualification and the experience. And I mean, people, of course, now that the salaries and the emoluments are high, people, of course, tend to join these institutions and obtain their qualifications and move forward. I think it's a fantastic landmark, and in the time to come, we could see a lot of youngsters joining these institutions and gaining their qualifications. Because I mean, if you look at the industry, if you walk into a like, for an example, like a place like Lake House, you could see a lot of journalists, but those are elderly journalists, because time to come they would have to have, make room for the youngsters to come in. They would retire. So I mean, there's big potential for this.
So do you say that the profession as a journalist is quite lucrative in terms of economics?
Yeah, at the moment, yes, because there's a lot of potential. Because if you are a good journalist, whether you write it in any national language or an international language, there are chances. Because if you look at the options available in the other parts of the world, because you can really move on. Because if you look at the veteran journalists we had in Sri Lanka, those who have exposed serious issues, like, for an example, let's say take Lasantha Wickramatunge for an example. Those guys have created the environment that you can go on and do investigative journalism, which we lack here at the moment, investigative journalism.
Let me ask you finally, Ashwin, what is the key driving force behind the new media?
I think it is the bandwidth and access to smart devices and easy to download whatever you like at a short period of time. then you tend to like the device and the service because it's very convenient and you can focus on what you like to receive on that particular device. I think that is the key driving force at the moment.
This morning I had with me Mr. Ashwin Hemmathagama. He's an experienced journalist with over 20 years in the profession of journalism. He's an investment banker turned now a lobby correspondent for the Parliament at Daily FT newspaper. He holds a diploma in journalism from University of Colombo and MBA from University of Wales. And we were talking about the 21st century media culture and Sri Lanka in today's Coffee with Dan. Thank you very much, Ashwin, for being today in Coffee with Dan.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
And let's meet up tomorrow with another interesting topic in Coffee with Dan.